Next on Currents News, fast-breaking developments in the Syria crisis. The White House is demanding Turkey stop its invasion as the human toll from the fighting is increasing.
The people have spoken, they voted.
Catholics are taking action, making sure their voices are heard, and that activism is getting the attention of politicians now pledging to honor Mother Cabrini. As the president's impeachment battle rages, a top Catholic expert is here to explain the consequences for America. Plus, a vibrant display of Hispanic heritage staged by the Jornada Catholic Youth Movement. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Tamara Lane. We begin with news out of Syria that's still breaking at this hour. President Trump is ramping up pressure on Turkey, demanding they end their invasion of Syria and put a ceasefire in place. At the same time, Russian troops are on the front lines that separate Syrian and Turkish forces. Stacey Cohan has the very latest from Washington.
Russia now joining Syrian government troops near the Syria-Turkey border as Turkey continues military strikes in the region. Moscow expanding its influence there following President Trump's highly criticized decision to withdraw U.S. troops from the area last week.
Turkey, Syria, let them take care of it.
The Kurdish-led fighters in northern Syria were a key U.S. ally in the fight against ISIS. Now, with the U.S. departure, the Kurds have turned to Russia and the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad for help.
We knew it was going to happen when the United States pulled forces out of northern Syria, that the only winners were going to be Russia, Iran, and the barbaric Assad regime.
Fear and heartbreak consuming this once relatively peaceful part of Syria as a humanitarian crisis grows. Another looming crisis, the 10,000-plus ISIS prisoners held throughout northern Syria, some of whom have already escaped amidst the fighting. Meanwhile, Turkey pushing further into Syria despite international pressure, claiming factions there are a threat to their nation. The White House announcing sanctions against Turkey and that Vice President Pence is planning a trip there.
The United States of America wants Turkey to stop the invasion, to implement an immediate ceasefire.
No word on when Pence will visit or if Turkey is ready to discuss a ceasefire. Stacey Cohan, Currents News.
The Patriarch of the Catholic Church in Syria is pleading for an immediate halt to the fighting. Joseph III is afraid the Christians who helped found the country are in danger of losing their lives. The Catholic leader is saying, "We know that those who will pay the price are particularly innocent, especially Christians who cannot defend themselves, while Christians believe that the world around them, especially the powerful, exploits them and does not think of them as if they are the scum of this world." And the news is not good tonight concerning the most vulnerable victims of the Turkish invasion. As many as 70,000 children are on the run, forced from their homes since the fighting started about a week ago. At least 4 children have been killed in northeast Syria, according to UNICEF. The organization is also reporting that 3 hospitals and a school have come under attack. Turning to the Brooklyn Diocese and the overwhelming support to honor Mother Frances Xavier Cabrini. It's happening thanks to Catholics making their voices heard, refusing to stay silent in the face of injustice. The saint was originally overlooked by City Hall despite winning a poll to celebrate women who built the city. Now that's all changing. Currents News' Tim Harfman has the story.
Laura Eng is one of many Catholics outraged over the Mother Cabrini statue controversy.
We feel slighted, definitely feel miffed, and I want her to get her due. She's due this honor.
Turning her anger into action, the Brooklyn resident emailed the She Built NYC campaign when the results were announced. The city's response, Mother Cabrini would be considered in the future. Laura was one of many in Brooklyn and Queens voicing their frustrations against the snub after Mother Cabrini overwhelmingly received the top spot. The Catholic activism throughout the diocese caught the attention of New York's politicians. Governor Andrew Cuomo showed his support for the first time before Monday's Columbus Day parade.
Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio has said that this is an affront and the Brooklyn Diocese wants to build a memorial to Mother Cabrini. They are right. We should applaud their courage and their activism.
Brooklyn Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio said the support is due to those who spoke up, wrote letters, and refused to stay silent.
I think I'm encouraged today. Again, if we didn't speak up, if we didn't try to do this, nothing would happen. So sometimes you have to make a little bit of noise so that people pay attention to you.
An Italian-American Catholic himself, Cuomo is pledging his backing for a memorial to the saint.
We're also pleased to announce that we're going to build a statue to Mother Cabrini.
We encourage that happens, and we'll work with him to put in a proper place and have the proper statue.
But speaking exclusively to Fox 5 News after the parade, Mayor Bill de Blasio took jabs at the governor.
I think it's a manufactured controversy. I think it's very sad that some people have chosen to do this.
We reached out to City Hall today for additional comment. A city spokesperson wrote, "We applaud the governor for joining us in our commitment to erect statues of women who have made an impact on New York City and look forward to having a statue of Mother Cabrini here."
If this is a city initiative, it should be reflective of the desires of the people. And the people have spoken, they voted. It's not manufactured.
As the statue controversy swirls, Catholics remain resilient. Tim Harfman, Currents News.
The latest tonight on the Ukraine controversy that's at the center of the battle over impeachment. For the first time, Joe Biden's son Hunter is breaking his silence over his dealings in the country. He's not admitting any wrongdoing, but this morning on TV was asked if being on the board of a Ukrainian company was a good idea.
I said to you, in retrospect, I wish that my judgment.
Time, you never thought this might not look right.
You know what? I'm a human. And you know what? Did I make a mistake? Well, maybe in the grand scheme of things, yeah. But did I make a mistake based upon some unethical lapse? Absolutely not.
Biden does say he likely got the job because of his last name. His dad was vice president when he was hired. The impeachment inquiry started after President Trump spoke with Ukraine's leader about the company Hunter Biden worked for. Tonight, legal experts are predicting a new California state law will open the door to possibly thousands of sex abuse lawsuits. The state's Governor Gavin Newsom giving his approval to the measure that allows survivors of abuse until age 40 to go to court. The new rules go into effect in January. About 1,000 lawsuits were filed when California lifted the statute of limitations for 1 year in 2003. Now, the new law allows for triple damages if victims can prove that employers tried to cover up the abuse. U.S. Catholic bishops are strongly backing new federal findings that reveal assisted suicide dangers for people with disabilities. The National Council of Disabilities is urging states to not legalize any form of assisted suicide or euthanasia. The bishops agree, saying there are serious risks of abuse, coercion, and discrimination posed by assisted suicide laws, specifically for people with disabilities. The legalization of doctor-assisted suicide separates people into two groups: those whose lives we want to protect and those whose deaths we encourage. This is completely unjust and seriously undermines equal protection under the law. Here in the Brooklyn Diocese, a Catholic church is making repairs after a vandal caused a lot of damage in a series of attacks last month. A woman struck at St. Gerard Majella Church in Hollis, Queens. She destroyed a shrine to the Blessed Virgin Mary, tore down signs, and ripped up the church's sprinkler system. The pastor, Joseph Jude Gannon, has replaced some of the signs and fixed the sprinklers. He says replacement parts for the shrine are on order and should arrive in a few weeks. The suspect has been civilly committed to a hospital. A powerful celebration of the Catholic faith and Hispanic heritage taking place at the Queens Church, hosting this year's Jornada Cultural Day. Over 100 people from the Brooklyn Diocese and the Archdiocese of New York filled Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church in Astoria. The Jornada movement teaches young Hispanics and Latino Catholics how to evangelize the faith. At this year's Cultural Day, People of all ages shared many traditions from the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Mexico, and other Spanish-speaking countries. There's a lot more news headed your way. A big night for Democrats gets started in less than an hour. We have a preview. With the impeachment battle heating up, a Catholic expert explains what it all means. The man often seen at the side of Pope Francis is leaving. We'll have the story behind the change. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Candidates are doing their final prep right now for the biggest primary debate in history. 12 presidential prospects are taking the stage at a very crucial moment. Joe Biden is no longer the sole frontrunner. Elizabeth Warren is already coming under fire for being a top contender, and Bernie Sanders is still recovering from a heart attack. Issues sure to be discussed: health care, climate change, gun control, and of course, the Ukrainian scandal. It's the first time candidates will spar since the president's impeachment inquiry began. There's a new poll out tonight that shows a majority of New Yorkers back the impeachment inquiry against President Trump. The statewide survey by Siena College. 62% of voters are backing the investigation launched by congressional Democrats, with 23% telling pollsters they are opposed to the effort. The House spent today hearing testimony from a State Department official behind closed doors. Joining us now to take a closer look at impeachment is Nicholas Sawicki of the Jesuit magazine America. Nick, thanks for being with us.
It's great to be with you today.
Breaking down a complicated issue. So now most Americans would say, why do we need an impeachment process when we can just vote President Trump out of office come next November?
You know, it's a fair question, and it's a question the founders raised in the Constitutional Convention in 1787. They said, they're very wary of the impeachment process. They're very wary of having a mechanism that could be used along partisan lines. But at the end of the day, they felt that if an officer betrayed the Constitution, they betrayed their oath to the United States, that there had to be some sort of mechanism, some sort of reconsideration, some sort of ability for the other branches of government to take action.
Checks and balances.
Checks and balances.
Now, even if the House does vote to impeach President Trump, it doesn't mean he just leaves office. How does this play out?
So an impeachment is frequently used as a broad term of removing someone from office. But in fact, an impeachment itself is a process undertaken by the House of Representatives where they begin an investigation. Articles of impeachment are brought before the House to specific charges, specifically 3 items in the Constitution: bribery, treason, and high crimes and misdemeanors. And now, if the House feels it necessary, they'll bring these articles up, and if they pass them, which is a simple majority vote, this is similar to a criminal indictment, like charges being brought up on someone. And then we go into the trial in the Senate, which would have to convict. So it's a very long process, it's a very complicated process, but it's one that has inherent checks and balances built into it.
We're in uncharted territory here. President Trump's impeachment process is a little different from the other ones. He could become the first president to be impeached and still run for office come 2020. How could President Trump be impeached and also run for office?
If you're not convicted by the Senate, of course you can still run. And even if you are convicted by the Senate has to convict you with an addendum essentially attached, which is outlined in the Constitution, that you can't hold public office ever again. And so the Senate has to specifically mandate that this individual, that this person who has been convicted through an impeachment process through both houses of Congress, cannot hold further office. And if that's found to be the case, the president cannot run for office again.
Okay, and explain that to me. Let's dig a little deeper. The Constitution says that a president can be removed from office for high crimes and misdemeanors. What are high crimes and misdemeanors?
Those are intentionally ambiguous. Bribery is outlined. It's very clearly it has a very foundational statutory basis that was one of the first laws Congress passed. Bribery in 1790, 1791. Treason is specifically outlined in the Constitution. It's if you incite insurrection against the United States or if you aid and abet the enemy. That's treason. And then you have this third category, high crimes and misdemeanors. And it was really brought in by George Mason at the Constitutional Convention. And it was really to cover all these things that, you know, what isn't treason, what isn't bribery, but what would constitute removing someone from office, having to remove them from office. And so it can be anything from, traditionally in English law, maladministration, the seizing of private property without recompense, but it really covers a multitude of sins.
Does a quid pro quo fit in there?
It depends on who undertakes the quid pro quo and for what end.
All right. Well, let's look at this. How do you expect this impeachment process to end?
Based on all of the news that's coming out, it seems that the president may be impeached in the House, which is controlled by the Democratic Party, and the Senate has to receive those articles of impeachment by their own rules. But what happens in the Senate is anyone's guess at this point. So what happens is unknown, and I couldn't really speak to that. But it is. But what we're seeing now is actually a foundational concern outlined by Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist Papers, that there may be a partisan element. And keeping that in mind, that's why the founders divided the process between the two houses of the legislative branch.
All right, we'll continue to watch this closely. Nicholas Sawicki of America Magazine, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
2 female terrorists who tried to destroy the Notre Dame Cathedral will be locked away for a long time. The women attempted to detonate a car bomb near the world-famous church in Paris in 2016, but it didn't go off. They've now been convicted for their crimes and face up to 30 years in prison. Before sentencing, they apologized for their actions. The women had pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. There's a shakeup in security surrounding Pope Francis. The Holy Father today naming Gianluca Brocoletti as commander of the Vatican security team. The former top cop for the Pope, Domenico Gianni, resigned after a press leak of a memo about an investigation at the Vatican bank that led to the suspension of 5 Holy See employees. Even though Gianni did resign, the Vatican insists he wasn't responsible for the leak. One of the new cardinals appointed by Pope Francis is speaking out about his horrible experiences in a gulag. The Lithuanian cleric was imprisoned for telling the Western world about Christian persecution. Melissa Butts reports on how a rosary made of bread helped him endure.
With his eyes full of tears, Cardinal Sigitas Tamkiewicz recalls his time in a gulag forced labor camp in Siberia. His crime was sharing with journalists from the Western world the chronicles of the church in Lithuania, a written series documenting real cases of Christian persecution. He served a 10-year sentence for reporting on the Soviet Union's practices in Lithuania.
The hardest moment of my time in prison was the interrogation. It would last up to 7 hours. It was terribly exhausting. A beautiful thing that happened was when one of the inmates, after being interrogated, found the faith and asked me to baptize him. I baptized him in prison.
He never lost faith, even in the midst of the forced labor to which he was subjected. It was quite the opposite. He looked for ways to celebrate Mass while he was forced to do laundry from sunrise to sunset, and even made a rosary with the little he had. In those moments, the now cardinal found the strength he needed to survive the suffering through faith.
I prayed every day. I made a rosary out of balls of bread and prayed all the mysteries with it every day. When I could, I tried to say Mass.
In 2018, Pope Francis saw the Soviet prisons for himself. The Archbishop of Kaunas at the time accompanied him on this visit. Just a year later, the Pope named him Cardinal, a decision Monsignor Tamkiewicz says is not only for him, but for all Lithuanians.
With this appointment, I think Pope Francis wanted to recognize the way of the cross walked by all Lithuanians.
The cardinal is living proof of resistance through faith to religious intolerance. That's why he assures that he wants to be a witness for those who suffer persecution simply for being Christian. In Rome, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
One of the most beloved popes and saints of our time is inspiring another canonization cause. The parents of Pope St. John Paul II are being considered for the elevation. That announcement coming from the Conference of Polish Bishops. The Catholic couple strongly influenced the faith of the future pope. The next steps will be to ask the Holy See to initiate the process at the diocesan level. Still to come on Currents News, a story of hope and how a church is rebounding from a bad time. A family was in big trouble. That's until a cop did something about it. Burned to the ground. A church that was a community staple for generations was devastated by a fire. But its congregation isn't giving up hope. Rebecca Gannon has that story.
Where two or more gather in his name, he is there. And it's true.
3 days since Woods Chapel United Methodist Church Odessa burned to the ground, smoke still rose from it. And in a manner of speaking, so did the congregation.
We had a outdoor service, kind of a memory service. We sit there and people shared their memories.
I'm 58 years old.
Penny Sisk.
I was probably 3 days old when I went in the front door.
Has 8 generations of memories tied to this church.
My great-great-great-grandfather's name was engraved in the stained glass window in the back. How precious have those windows been.
From the air, you can see those stained glass windows are lost, as is most of the rest of the church. Despite the ashes and the charred century-old wood, the heart of Woods Chapel remains.
And the memories are actually in your heart. And as long as we come together and worship, it doesn't matter where we are.
And at the heart of this congregation is hope. Already, other churches offered up worship spaces to Woods Chapel. Until Thursday, this church off Highway 131 was older than the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Its congregation will be back.
It's not going to be the same building, we know that, and it may not look like it, but we want a building here for our children and the generations to come.
Roughly 30 people regularly attend services here. On Sunday, it was close to 60.
I do see the potential for what could happen. A rejuvenation of the neighborhood.
That was Rebecca Gannon reporting. Unofficial cause for the fire has not been released yet, but the pastor believes it may have been an electrical short. Stranded at a gas station with no money and no food. A family in Florida was stuck, kicked out of a relative's house with no hope of getting home until they got a little help from a Good Samaritan. Miami-Dade officer Jose De Leon noticed the family of 6 were in need, so he sprung into action, raising funds for the family by getting his fellow officers to pitch in and help.
They all chipped in some of their own personal funds. We were able to give it to the mother. She started to cry, the father started to cry, we almost started to cry, and we were just happy to be able to do that for them.
The officers also took the family to a local homeless center. They eventually got plane tickets to go back to Michigan. That is Currents News. I'm Tamara Lane. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.